Hello and welcome to our podcast series, Counsellors on the Couch. My name's Faye Short and I'm a professor at Bangor University and I'm the course director for the MSc in Counselling. And this is our podcast exploring counselling in the real world and the experience of counselling for counsellors and clients and trainee counsellors. In today's episode, we're going to be focusing specifically on careers in counselling and how to become a counsellor. And joining me on the couch today is Kevin.
I'm Kevin Deyna-Jones. I am also a lecturer at Bangor University on the MSc in Counselling, and I also work as a counsellor for the NHS in North Wales for the Primary Care Mental Health Counselling Service.
And Suzy.
Hello, my name's Dr. Suzy Clarkson and I am a lecturer on the course at Bangor University and also the placement coordinator.
And we're also joined today by Anisha.
Hello, I'm a student on the MSc Counselling course this year. I am currently on my way to the second year of the course and enjoying summer and placements.
Thank you all so much. So to get us started then, I just want to ask you a little bit about careers in counselling and what brought you to where you are at the moment, whether that's a lecturer on the course, the path that you took to get there, or the path that you took to become a trainee counsellor. So let's start then with Kevin. Can you tell us a little bit about how you came to become a counsellor?
So initially I started out in teaching, and that was a career that I was very invested in, but I found that teaching was not just for me, but also I found that I was much more interested in the mental health of students and their well-being. And whilst I was able to do that, I actually found it was quite restrictive, and I wanted to really work in helping people deal with trauma and deal with difficulties. And so I decided to retrain, and I did it a kind of roundabout way because I was, first of all, really interested in psychology. So I went off and did a psychology degree. And I did that at Bangor, where I learned a lot about the mind and behaviour. And in that, there was an excellent module called Counselling Skills. And I'll be honest, I did not want to be a counsellor. I just wanted to do the module because I knew it'd be really good. And when I'm doing that, in practicing, having a go of listening to people and learning about things, I found it fascinating. Just found it absolutely riveting, if you like, but also empowering and so useful that I decided, well, I'm going to take this further. And I went on to do a master's in counselling. And from that placement that I did on the master's with the NHS, I now carried on doing voluntary work and sessional work, and now work as a Band 5 counsellor. So that's how I got to where I am today.
Thanks, Kevin. And I think it's quite common for counsellors, and I know that this was true for me as well, to maybe not start as counsellors, to maybe start in other directions and then take a career change through life. And I think that's a really important message. It's never too late. If somebody's keen on a career in counselling, whether you're coming straight from your undergraduate degree or from quite early in your career, or indeed quite late in your career, and you've decided to make a change, that's absolutely fine. You can still pursue a career as a counsellor.
I know that counselling can be a second or third career, and I was really grateful to come from an education background because I was used to kind of the framework of a 50-minute session or a 1-hour class, and that's kind of how a session can feel, that you've got to make sure the client is bringing a certain topic and we're going to work over something. Now, I'm not saying it's as structured at all, but there was a lot of skills I learned in teaching that have lent to the kind of psychoeducation that happens in counselling. But also what I like most of all is counselling is completely different. And I was able to put the client in the driver's seat and let them lead the session. And I think that was the biggest change that I found most valuable.
Fantastic. Thank you, Kevin. I'm going to move over to Suzy and ask about your career path that brought you to counselling.
So as a mum, I didn't have particularly many hobbies. So in the evenings, I used to go to evening class and I did sociology, psychology and counselling modules. Then decided that after a period of time, I wanted to go back into education. I did an access course of which there was a psychology module. which made me then determine that I wanted to be an educational psychologist. I went off to university, and while on my course, rather like Kevin, I did a counselling course which regenerated my interest in counselling. I then went off and did my level 3 and level 4 whilst also studying, and then had the opportunity to go on the master's course. And so went on to the master's course, and as Kevin did, worked with the NHS, and I still do sessional work for the NHS. But linked with that, I wanted to do the education side. So obviously that's how I've ended up being a lecturer in counselling. So I feel fortunate enough to be able to still do the education side alongside the counselling and my counselling role. So it's rather like Kevin being able to see the link between the education and the counselling. I think being able to support somebody, education's a gift, and I think counselling's a gift as well, to be able to support somebody in learning about themselves, developing, and I feel the two go hand in hand.
Yeah, I completely agree. And that's definitely the route that I took when I started. I did my undergraduate degree in psychology, and then a master's degree in psychology, and then my PhD in psychology. But then I definitely pursued a more education route, looking at teaching in further education and higher education. And that took me back to counselling, just thinking about that link. And I think for me, counselling is an awful lot about learning. As a client, you're learning about yourself, you're growing, you're developing, and that's really similar to what you're doing as a student. You're learning and developing and growing.
I think if you link back in as a counsellor, though, when I did my counselling course, I felt that I became a lot more reflective. And I think in education, you have to be a reflective practitioner. And then when you go, and I did the master's, and then I'm actually working with clients, you realise that you're still learning about yourself and becoming more self-aware and more reflective. And I think the two hold hands there in being a reflective practitioner as well.
Absolutely.
And I think going back to one of the things, like I'm very aware that when I say what I've done, it's a kind of a glossy version. What I don't say is all this started because I went to therapy myself. And as a teacher, I went to see the GP because I was suffering with what then was diagnosed as anxiety and depression, and offered sessions of CBT. And that's where it all began. It was such a transformative experience to be a client and realize, kind of see myself differently, and to realize I could change and I could grow and I could become a better person and not struggle in the way that I had been. That really was the very, very beginning, was actually being a client. And I think whilst I often kind of say, oh, I wanted to do this, it really, if I'm honest, it started as wanting to have to make myself come out of the difficult time I was having as a teacher. Not that I'm putting people off teaching, but...
I think that's really common amongst a lot of the trainees I work with. They come to counselling from that place of having previously been a client. They've previously experienced the transformative power of counselling, and that's inspired them to want to pursue a career in counselling. Which brings us to our current trainee, who is currently on the master's course studying counselling. So, Anisha, could you tell us a little bit about the journey that brought you to wanting to study counselling and how you got onto the master's?
Yeah, definitely. I have a pretty straightforward route to talk about. I started with my bachelor's in psychology honours back at home in India. And I remember thinking that we had a lot of optional modules. We had sports psych, we had forensic, and counselling was one of them. And you really just have two routes back at home that you originally think of, clinical or counselling. And I really wanted to test my skills and ability to sustain myself in this career, which I believed was important. The resilience that comes with being a counsellor. So then I went on to do a postgraduate diploma in counselling just to test the waters, to see if my skills fit, if I could actually sustain myself and have the stamina to go through this career path. Because this was my primary career choice. It wasn't secondary. So I did that, and I've always wanted to come to the UK. That was the original plan anyway, to have an international education. And I found Bangor and narrowed down on it and filtered through because it was a 2-year master's, and that was it. key element in sort of choosing this course. To have 2 years to develop my skills, to have 2 years to make my mistakes, and to have 2 years of contact with all the tutors and professors, and to have 2 years to do the placement. That's how I got here, and I do love it. I am loving it, but I'm also having an open mind to I might change my career path, and that's okay. But it will be within this field of mental health, and really allowing myself to explore that while I'm exploring counselling is where I'm at.
I think those are really interesting points, particularly you emphasise that stamina and that resilience to be able to work as a counsellor and needing that time in your training. You know, the Masters at Bangor is a 2-year programme, and that's deliberately to give people the time to be able to grow and develop and have enough time to complete what is our integrated 100 hours of practice with real clients. And you do need some time to be able to do that. That's not something you can race through. So yeah, I think those are really excellent points that you raised there. You mentioned at the end as well about changing your career path and not being fixed. Mental health is a huge field. There's an awful lot that can happen in mental health, and the counselling is a really important part of that, but there's lots of other careers. And I think it's really important for me, teaching on this counselling course, that we prepare students not just to become a counsellor, but to become a practitioner in the field of mental health, even if they then pursue it in a different direction.
Yeah, I definitely agree. As we were reflecting on how life experiences inform your choice of career, I think it's important to have it keep informing that and keep informing where you go with your counselling training, because we're big on CPD and we're big on continuing development through multiple courses. Next year, I have the option of working with children, maybe, but I'm not sure if I'll take that. But then again, it's an option to have, and I don't know what that experience will give to me in terms of my reflection of the practice.
You mentioned next year having the optional modules, and that's also something about this particular Masters, that in the first year, all students do the same set of core modules. So you all did your initial training to be a counsellor, and that core, what you have to do. So learning about person-centered therapy, psychodynamic therapy, cognitive therapy, behavioural therapy, learning the fundamentals of counselling, ethics, all of those really important aspects, practising the counselling skills and the communication skills, learning about mental health and well-being. But then in your second year, alongside the research that you do for your dissertation and alongside your placement, students choose 2 optional modules. And for the first time this year, we've got some child counselling optional modules. You said you're thinking about that, but we do also have lots of others. You know, we have clinical psychology, neuropsychology. So there's lots of other options that students can take. And that really feeds into that broader understanding of mental health. So what's tempting you towards the child counselling, and what's making you think, actually, maybe not child counselling?
That actually connects really well into careers. My placement currently is both of them is about working with parents. One of them is about working with parents of children who have disabilities, and one is with parents who have children who were sexually assaulted. I never imagined I would work with children, ever. I'm not a very entertaining person with children, so I don't really vibe with them. But thinking about my career trajectory and the placements that I have, and sort of building on that, I am working with parents. It's important to have an understanding of their world. And even though I might not work with children, the modules will help me really understand the developmental stages that these children are in and understand the experience of these parents, essentially. And that's what's drawing me to that. And then that connects to my career trajectory as well. My placement could turn into a potential job opportunity. So to have those skill sets through the optional modules is a big lucky strike for me. Why I'm maybe not going for the child is because I'm interested in other stuff. There's the neuro one that I'm really interested in, and clinical psych has been my other love that I haven't had the opportunity to touch yet. And neuro is really interesting for me. So it's a dilemma, and it's unfortunate we only get to pick 2.
That is true, but it's a good dilemma, right? It's better to have too much choice than not enough choice. And something that you might be interested to know about is the child counselling ones, there is actually 4 child counselling modules. 2 of them are about counselling children, like practically the skills, but 2 of them are more about modern families, child development, parental relationships, and actually they might be something that you're more interested in because it will give you more of the theory rather than the specific on-the-ground skills for working with children. Also, you could just pick one of those, maybe the child development one, to give you that insight, but then also pick the neuro for your second semester. So there are still options out there. So thinking then about careers more broadly in counselling, I think it'd be really interesting for any of the listeners to hear a little bit about the professional bodies in counselling, because counselling is quite a unique career in that it's not a title that is legally protected in the UK. So in the UK, anybody can call themselves a counsellor. That kind of sounds scary, I know. They literally could just put a sign up and say, I am a counsellor. In order to get insurance and become a member of a professional body for counselling, then of course you would need to be appropriately qualified. You would need to gain those kind of qualifications that are relevant, and the Masters being one of them, but there are lots of other courses across the UK. But the title itself is not regulated. And I think that's why there are so many counselling courses out there. You know, you'll see counselling courses on the internet that are 3 days online and you've done a counselling course. And then you'll see others like ours, which is 2 years masters, which is a huge commitment. And it's, well, what's the difference? And for me, I think that's a really confusing field. Does anybody else have any thoughts on that?
I kind of think of those unqualified people like in the Netflix series Afterlife with Ricky Gervais, where that has got to be the worst counselling I've ever seen. And a lot of counselling you see on television is just really, really bad. And I'll sit with my husband watching fictional therapists thinking, he's like, and he said, like, that's not right, is it? That's not right. They shouldn't do that. And there's so much bad practice presented in the media that I just think, and I know that's happening because you hear clients who have had really bad experiences with untrained therapists, or they've found the wrong route. So it can be a real Wild West, unfortunately. And this is exactly the opposite of how it should be, because you've got vulnerable people that need support who don't know where to go and look. Luckily, we do have the BACP, the UKCP, and the NCS, which is now the NCPS, different governing bodies and professional bodies, I should say, who are ensuring that there is integrity, there is quality. And I am so grateful that I did the Masters in those 2 years for me to develop. You mentioned earlier, Anisha, about making mistakes. I definitely made mistakes. I definitely, and whilst that's not ideal, that's how you learn, by tripping up and realizing, oh, I shouldn't do that, or maybe I could do this better or differently. And it was having the opportunity to work with other like-minded people who are keen to develop their skills and really wanted to grow and thrive and become effective. And I think that's the key part there, isn't it? Is being effective. You want to be there for your client, who is a real person, either sat in front of you or on the video call or on the telephone, who is bringing real issues, real trauma or dilemma, and you need to be authentic and able to help them. So I think it is only right that we have a strong overview of how how counselling can be ethical. I think that's such a key thing. But I do worry about the kind of wild west of not having a protected title. And it kind of, I'm already aware. I'm like, what do we do? How do we create good courses and we train good counsellors, and that's what we need to do.
And I think that's all we really can do. We can talk about the protected title and the benefits and the challenges of protected titles. And it's not always the answer to just legally protect a title. Sometimes that can cause complexities too, but providing really good quality courses. And I think both you, Kevin, and Anisha have mentioned making mistakes. And that reminds me of the motto of our course, which is grist for the mill. All things bring grist for the mill. And for me, that's really what our course is about. It's providing opportunities for learning and growth and development and allowing mistakes to be made in a safe environment. It's why on our course, all students have to complete their first semester of practice on the course before anybody is signed off to go out and work with clients, just to make sure that they've got that space to make those mistakes, to learn, to gain some grist for the mill that they'll then go on to use. And each one of those experiences, each one of those mistakes that they make makes them a better counsellor in the end. Assuming that they're safe and contained mistakes, of course. We don't want mistakes that are really damaging.
You want to build up a relationship with your client where they can be honest with you and, recognize that you're not perfect. You're not this, idol that they have to. I strongly encourage my clients. In fact, and I know all our students say, correct me if I'm wrong when they're talking to their clients. And it's just inviting that client to have we're exploring together, we're on a journey together, and hopefully you have that trust instilled very early on, as soon as possible, where you can be able to, it's not necessarily make mistakes, but just fall over to get, or make that together. I think, Suzy, you probably kind of,
I was going to say, you've also got the benefit if you're with one of the organisations, such as the BACP, the recommendation to have supervision. And supervision is that continual long support of somebody else and being able to share how you're working and look for better ways of working. A supervisor doesn't have to be above you. You can both be working at the same level, but the insight and a different perspective of how you're working with somebody can be really, really beneficial. It's also really good to discuss things where you think you potentially have made a mistake and how you could better develop that for in the future. I'm just wondering how Anisha feels about having gone out on placement and how working with clients and supervision, how that's felt to you.
I think I've learnt that a career in counselling is not a solo travel journey. It's every single day where different people influence the work that you do. Your supervisor, how you deal with your personal stuff with your therapist, your line manager, and being able to trust your line manager to hold your mistakes and guide you through that. And your tutors who are accessible to you and to ask questions about the theories and things like that. And really your peers as well, to go into these group sessions that we have about personal and professional development and trust your colleagues and your peers to give you insight that you can use with your client. So it's really not about a solo travel. It's about trusting everyone to hold space for you and indirectly hold your client through you.
I think that's a fantastic example. It's not a solo journey, and it really isn't. And I think that's very much the culture that we have on our course and on the other courses that I've worked with. It's about us providing an environment and a support system for our students to be able to grow and develop. And that, to me, is absolutely key to ensuring that students are prepared for placement and supported during the placement. So we talked a little bit, Anisha, about next year and the modules you'll be choosing. But given that you've now come to the end of your first year, if you were to think back on that training process, is there any advice you'd give to anybody who's thinking of doing either this master's or any counselling master's? What would they need to prepare? How might they think about coming into a course like this?
First thing I would say is stick to the advice deadlines.
Nobody listens to my deadlines, Anisha, ever. I tell people how they should plan their work to make sure they get everything done in time, and nobody listens.
It's the mistakes journey, Christopher the Mill.
That's it.
I think that really tuning yourself into the experience, living through the stress of it all, and accepting whatever comes through your peers, whatever comes through your tutors, engaging in all the skills activities that we do that on the outset might seem silly. Sometimes it might seem like, oh, I already know this. Why do I have to engage in this? But really engaging in all the activities, all the practice sessions, all the lectures, and giving yourself into the course, I think was really important for me to do. And at one point, my friends and I, we were freaking out about how every conversation we had was about the course and about the client work. But that is just how it is. Now we've sort of moved on to talk about other things. But that is your first day experience. It is about really training yourself to sustain yourself in the second year and the placement time. I think my advice coming in would be ready to embrace the challenge of the first year and embrace what the tutors tell you and learn from your peers. And I think it was an important learning for me that people come from different walks of life on this course, and everyone has a different perspective. And it's important to take all that in, because you might never have an opportunity where you're in such a diverse diaspora of people ever again. So it's really important to embrace that.
I think that's absolutely fantastic advice, Anisha. And thinking back to when you were choosing a master's course, what do you have any advice for people who are thinking about choosing a course and what to look out for? I noticed that we've mentioned previously the professional bodies. So just for any listeners out there, the big professional bodies in the UK are the British Association for Counselling and Psychotherapy, the National Counselling Society, which is now the National Counselling and Psychotherapy Society, and also UKCP, which is the UK Counselling and Psychotherapy Group. So there are lots of different professional bodies out there that might accredit. And if you're looking for a counselling course, we'd always advise that you look for a course that meets the requirements of maybe one of these big professional bodies. But is there any other advice that you would give for somebody looking for a counselling course in the UK?
Definitely. Starting with the bodies, I think the research I was an international student, so the research into a completely different country with Google search set to my home country is difficult. So being able to talk to people and ask them the questions as to what is required to thrive in the real world after my course, and being aware of that is important. With regards to selecting a master's course, I think understand your own pacing. I would not have thrived in a 1-year master's course. I would have been all over the place, scrambled. Understand your pacing and really where you are in your life and what you require from the counselling course in terms of what skills might I need to develop more. And then further from that, I think would be thinking about where you want to go next in terms of your career. Cannot be your ultimate. Don't be narrow about it. Get broader with your course. Don't narrow yourself just because you have a specific position in a specific company in mind. It's about getting a very broad experience in terms of your course, which will then expand what you think your ideal career might be. So it's really about allowing yourself to have a strong and broad foundation and then going on to narrower things. So picking your master's course shouldn't be, I only want to do that one thing, so I'm only going to go in that direction.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think that's one of the benefits of an integrative course. Now, there are some amazing purist courses out there, just person-centered or CBT courses, but there's a real benefit to having an integrative course that covers lots of different elements. So on the master's course that you're doing and that we lead, it's person-centered, psychodynamic, cognitive and behavioural. So it gives a real flavour across the different types of counselling and widens that toolbox.
I also think that we've had some amazing students that have then realised at the end of their second year that counselling hasn't been the direction, but they want to work within mental health nursing. And I think the skills are so transferable into other areas that keeping that broadness, especially when considering modules and things like that within their second year, gives them the benefits of doing that.
That I think counselling can be used if you're working with people, and it's going to be useful wherever you go. It's not just mental health. Actually, I think you can go into business or into industry. You're going to know about listening to people. You're going to know about how problem solving, and it's a hugely, and anyone that comes on a course and in any counselling course says they have grown in themselves. They've learned about introspection and inflection, and those are invaluable skills. That self-awareness is critically important to survive in the world. So I don't think we've not met anyone that hasn't found huge value in what they've learned, and wherever they take it doesn't have to just be counselling or mental health. It's a life course, really. It's a life skill.
Completely agree. And I think that brings us to the end of this podcast, but a really nice message to end on, which is that training to be a counsellor really does give you those skills, not just to pursue that career in counselling, but also to pursue other potential careers and to grow and develop as a person yourself. As you said, every single student we see come through our course, they develop during that course. They grow, they change, and they learn an awful lot about themselves. And I think there's a real value in that in itself, irrespective of the future careers. Although we do see some amazing future careers. I'm just in touch with lots of our graduates at the moment who are doing incredible things. But I think there's a deeper element to a counselling course about the person within. Thank you for listening to our podcast, Counsellors on the Couch. I hope that you've learned more about the counselling profession and how counselling supports mental health. If you'd like to learn more about training to be a counsellor, head to the link in our description. Join us next week for another episode of Counsellors on the Couch.